All right, welcome back, everyone. Glad that you're still sticking around with me. And the fact that you're sticking around tells me that you are super caring to learn this new skill, whether it is through excitement, curiosity, or any sort of personal interest. So don't forget that. We have got through a lot of information in Blender so far. But again, the first few lessons were intentionally designed like that because now when we start putting everything that we've learned into practice, these tools are not going to come as a shock to you. Great. Now, before we start any modeling process and editing our mesh, we're going to talk about destructive versus non-destructive editing. Again, we have all this creativity built up in our heads and an idea of what this object is going to look like, but here we're essentially asking the big question, when should we model by hand, and when should I let Blender do all the heavy lifting for me? Now, most of you might be tempted to say the latter. Yeah, just let Blender do everything. But even at a beginner level, you're going to find yourself using both types of editing a lot. So, to start off, what does destructive mean? Destructive editing refers to the permanent application of changes to an object. So, despite the name, it's not anything bad, it just means that the change is permanent. So, for example, if I take this default cube, I'm in a new file here, I will tab into edit mode and let's apply a bevel. So I'll go to face select mode, click a face, let's just apply a bevel, right? Something like that. You could see that this has become a permanent part of the mesh. Same thing goes for something like extrusion. So maybe I'll extrude this face out and even deletions. So let's say if I click this face, I could press delete in my keyboard and let's just delete that face. So anything that really takes a permanent change on this object, all these are permanent right now, this is destructive editing. Now, we can't really tweak the amount of this specific tool's effect unless we Control Z and re-edit it. So I'm pressing Control Z, going all the way back. And you can even see just from me undoing everything, Blender doesn't go straight back to the cube, but it goes through and traces back all the steps and selections that I've made and previous edits until I've made it to the point of that first bevel. And to keep in mind, Blender does not have an infinite number of undoing that you can perform. There is a limit. So I could show you what this limit is if we go to Edit, then we go to Preferences, and under the System tab here, there is a Memory and Limit section. And this number next to Undo Steps here tells you how many steps Blender can trace back before it starts to tell you, all right, no more. This setting below Undo Memory Limit, this determines how much RAM Blender can use for undoing. By me setting it to 0, this tells Blender to use as much memory as needed, which is fine for this case because I'm not doing anything super complicated in this course, so setting it to 0 shouldn't be that much of a problem for me. Now, as a word of caution, increasing this number of undo steps means that Blender will therefore have to keep a larger track of all the steps that you made, consequently increasing performance, which, depending on the specifics of your laptop, this may not be ideal. And you can even see that if I try to drag this bar all the way up, there's a hard cap at 256. So it's not like I could just keep on doing forever. Okay, and in my case, I'm just simply using a laptop here, and a laptop, unlike a regular PC, it's not going to be able to handle anything powerful that I do in Blender. So by keeping it small and by not setting it anything large, you're going to find yourself being a little bit more cautious with everything that you do in Blender, instead of just saying, yeah, I'll make whatever edits that I want. Don't worry, I can just undo until I get back to the point. Okay, so this is important. It is a slight tangent, but it is necessary. So choose the settings that are most appropriate to you, or just copy the ones that I'm using, and let's head back to this default cube. Okay, so if I redo everything that I had before, I could redo by pressing Shift Control Z. So I'm just going to redo all the changes that I made. So depending on the type of edit made, some of them are going to be easier to tweak than others. So for instance, this extrusion that I made, let's say if I realized that this was too short, I could select this face and I can move it, for instance. So this could be a nice way to configure the distance, but I do note that I can't just put it back to the way it was before. So even if I try to bring it exactly where it originally was, um, you could see here that even Blender is starting to bug up a little bit. And this is because I'm going to get the same problem as mentioned before, me having double edges along the side of the cube. One of them obviously around from the original face, and one of them from the face that I've just extruded. So instead, if I just bring this back out, what I could do is I could select all these new faces. So let's select all these new faces that I've made. All these ones from the extrusion. I'm going to press delete on my keyboard and select all these faces. But even now, I kind of get what I had before, but now at whole. So to get around that, I will select all the edges around it. So these are the edges. And then I could press F on my keyboard, F for face, and that will fill it back in. But that's a lot of work to just recover something that I've already done, which highlights a downside of destructive editing. Namely, if you do change your mind later, you can be redoing a lot of work. Now, on top of that, just for the looks of it, redoing this bevel that I made will be a nightmare. I have slanted edges. I need to keep all these faces in the same slant. It's just a complete nightmare. And at that point in time, I might as well just start from scratch. Now, I don't want this to be a disincentive for you to stay away from destructive editing. I don't want you to be scared from this because in reality, most of the work that you're going to be doing in edit mode, you're going to have to face this at some point. But hopefully, you could see from this showcase that I've done why I chose to talk to you about it first. So, to summarize, destructive editing is great for when you're sure about the shape, when you need precise manual controlling, or you may be just finalizing some of the details. But perhaps if you're applying one of these more destructive tools and you don't want to take the gamble down the line um, about worrying if you need to trace back your steps later, nothing's stopping you from duplicating your object and saving a backup version in the outline. So if you do make a mistake and you want to go back to what this shape looked like in that point in time, you definitely have the option to do so. Okay, great. Now, with respect to non-destructive editing, you may have guessed just from the name, it is the opposite of destructive editing. So in non-destructive editing, Blender keeps your original mesh and applies changes on top of it using modifiers. Now, modifiers in Blender are smart effects that you can toggle, stack, and adjust at any time without damaging your original shape. So to find modifiers, what you're going to do is in this properties panel here, click the wrench icon. You want to select an object that you want to apply a modifier to. So in this case, I want to be in object mode, so I could select an object, and then I can click add modifier. So the specifics of some modifiers are going to be covered in chapter 3, but just to showcase their effect to you, for instance, let's create a new cube to start with. Let me just use a plain cube. And I am going to add let's say bevel modifier. So I'm going to choose bevel here. And let's say if I tweak some of the amount here, so maybe this is the bevel that I'm applying. Um, I could see that the bevel modifier effect changes in real time because this real time button, so this computer icon right here, is enabled. And I know it's enabled because the icon's background is blue. If I disable it, Blender shows me the original shape. If I enable it and then let's say tab into edit mode, you can see that the original geometry is preserved. Now let's say if I destructively edit it, let's say making an extrusion of some sort, the geometry of the original shape is now modified. Now the modifier does its magic on top of that, um, which you could even see visually here. But in addition, if I disable this modifier, I still preserve the original destructive edits that I made. And it's going to stay this way until I have used this drop-down menu and click apply. Now, you can only apply a modifier in object mode, so let's go back there. If I hit drop down and apply, now everything that I've done with the modifier has now been applied destructively. And I can confirm that by going back into edit mode, and here are the new geometry that I've made. So as powerful and as wonderful as modifiers are, realistically, they cannot always achieve what we're chasing in an object's design, which is why we often use a mixture of both of these editing types. Okay, hopefully that gives you a gist of the different types of editing. Now in the next lesson, it's time for us to put everything that we've learned so far into practice with respect to creating that crate that we've all been wanting and wishing to make. So, see you in the next lesson, where we are going to start building a rough draft of that crate.